Hello, fans, and welcome to a Radulich and Broadcasting TV Party Tonight Extra. I'm your host, the mandated reporter, and frankly, I'm mortified, Mr. Mark Radulich. We were supposed to be doing boxing coverage proper, a Andrew Shelby versus Jay Harris fight from overseas this afternoon on ESPN+, but I blinked and it disappeared from my calendar and possibly from this plane of reality. So it didn't happen. But we don't like to leave you fans in the lurch. We've got an extra. We've got a retro boxing match that Pat Mullin wanted to do tonight after I tricked him into thinking tonight was Robert Whittaker versus Adesanya, which is actually in 2 weeks. He was like, well, if you're not recording anything, I've got something for you. So here he is, something for you. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Toxic Masculinity to you, totally 80s Pat Mullin. How you doing, sir?
I'm good. So this is what happens when I give up my time, and it's a clever ruse on the part of our host. Even despite that, I decided to be nice and picked a fight that has heavyweights, which we all know Mark has an affinity for like no one else.
And speaking of lover of heavyweights, ladies and gentlemen, Old Man Touchy, your host of the 411 Ground and Pound radio show and your coverage master of all MMA events live on 401mania.com. Ladies and gentlemen, Robert Winfree. How do you do, sir?
Look, heavyweights tend to be terrible. We all know it. We just try to find fights here and there that aren't. But we all know it's true. Even right. Mark.
This is true. All right, Pat, you've pulled up here from... Now, when Robert... you didn't tell me what we were doing before we decided we were going to do it, and I invited Robert on, and I said, hey, we're going to do a heavyweight fight. All Pat told me was that it's a lot of back and forth, probably from the late 70s, early 80s. You picked Tommy Morrison versus Carl Williams. When exactly did this take place?
So this fight took place in 1993, very early in 1993, on a doubleheader featuring another heavyweight fight with George Foreman against Pierre Kutzer. This is basically Carl Williams' last shot at being a true heavyweight contender, based on some 50-50 drawing with some of the better heavyweights of his era. His last three well-known opponents, he's gone 1-2. He had a win over Asia Casio, former cruiserweight champion. Split decision loss to terrible Tim Witherspoon, in which he acquitted himself very well. And a one-round disaster against Iron Mike Tyson for the undisputed heavyweight championship.
Now, folks, if you're listening to this, if you don't know who Tommy Morrison is, but that name sounds vaguely familiar, he played Rocky's apprentice in Rocky V. In the movie... Yes, they made a fifth version of Rocky, Jonas. Hush, you're supposed to be in bed. All right, Robert Winfree, any thoughts on this before we dig into this fight?
I've seen this fight before, but I can't remember how it goes specifically, so this will be fun.
All right. Well, 3, 2, 1, I'm going to hit play, and we're going to get started here. All right, so Pat, you said this was on the undercard of a George Foreman fight, is that correct?
No, this was the main event. The Foreman fight actually opened the show.
Really? Okay.
There was a lot of hype around Tommy Morrison as the next great white hope at heavyweight. He had not only the movie notoriety from being in Rocky V, which despite being a terrible movie was a significant part of the popular culture. He scored some impressive knockouts in a few different positions. I mean, if you haven't seen the ESPN 30 for 30 on Tommy Morrison, I'd recommend you look it up, anyone listening. It's one of the better ones they've done.
I wish I found the 30 for 30 podcast after Podcoin announced they were going belly up, and I deleted the app and had to resubscribe to things. I was looking for some other stuff to listen to, and I found the 30 for 30 ESPN podcast, which seems to be a separate entity from the show. There was one on the creation of the UFC, and one on I can't remember the boxer's name, but it was about the boxer that was in prison, and they ran a series of boxing events from.
They did a James Scott podcast.
Yes, they did. That's him.
That's highly worth listening to. Then I got to check that out.
It was really good. I was actually listening to it at work, and there were a couple of girls in the office who was like, "What's going on here?" And I'm like, "Well, apparently, back in the day, they ran a series of boxing events from Rawa State Prison, and the guy that was fighting in those fights nearly won a title.
James the Great Scott.
It was really it's a pretty uplifting show, as a matter of fact. When they talk, you talk about how prisons are now versus what they were trying to do then. We, give these guys something to work towards. Don't let them be idle. Give them some meaning to life. I thought it was very positive. Here we go, round 1: Tommy Morrison versus Carl Williams. So, Pat, what can we look forward to here in this first round?
Williams is much more of a classic boxer than is Morrison. Morrison's going to look to get inside, swarm, and unleash his devastating left hook, which, to be honest, Carl Williams is very prone to being hit with. He has a bad tendency of jabbing and dropping his right hand as he jabs. On the flip side, Tommy is very open to being hit with a double jab and a triple jab. So if Carl can get that working, there's a very good chance he can control distance and work and outpoint Tommy.
Wow, Tommy hit him with a right hook. He kind of went.
Already in evidence, the bad defensive habits of Carl Williams dropping his right hand.
Yeah, I was going to say, and then so he hit him with the right hook. He kind of went, "What the hell?" And then he hit him with the left hook and dropped him on his ass.
And that wasn't even Tommy's best left hook. That was high up on the head. Williams just got clipped with it, but Morrison hits that hard that he can drop you with that if he hits you flush.
It was a very legitimate weapon. It was part of the reason that there was so much, I hate to say uneducated hype around him fighting Mike Tyson, but I'm going to say it. Because, Mike Tyson actually can box. He just chose not to in many respects. But there was a lot of, they both have dynamite power. They both have good left hooks. I wonder who would win. And it's probably, I hate to say it was in the best health interest of Morrison long term that fight never materialized because of how badly his health deteriorated anyway, but that would not have been a competitive affair.
And what we're seeing so far is basically it's gone Tommy's way. Despite, even without the knockdown, he's been able to get in without a lot of a problem. Carl Williams is much more willing to exchange on the inside than we're used to.
Yeah, he should be trying to fight more at distance. He has the much better jab. He just, again, has a few bad defensive habits associated with it. But he's very willing to throw the double left hook, go body head with it, and then you see Tommy mostly trying to counter him based on timing with that. He lets him get a couple off that he partially blocks, and then as soon as he's done, he fires back. A rather traditional kind of counter by feel stuff.
Tommy just laid in a good right hook to the body. My son and I were horsing around today. I was actually kind of showing him how to dig into the body, go underneath the ribs and all of that, instead of what he likes to usually do, which is punch me in the sternum. And
he'll break his hand punching you in the sternum.
I tried to explain that to him. So I said,
on the plus side, if you can get him to make an actual fist, you're a step ahead of the game.
And Carl just popped him with a good right hand and an uppercut.
Yeah, I was going to say, Carl's best punch this round was that uppercut. He got Tommy a few times with it, but Tommy seemed to have shrugged it off and was able to return fire with a series of hooks hither and thither. Definitely good.
Tommy's reaction to being hit tends to be more, I'm going to swing back unless you actually lay him out.
Mm-hmm.
I thought one thing Williams did there, which was interesting, was he started trying to time Morrison's left hook towards the end of the round and counter it by shooting a short right hand in before Tommy could throw his hook. And we're going to see a replay here, I believe, of the knockdown. Williams went low with the left hook, high with the left hook, and a right. Dropped his hand. Morrison clipped him. You can see high on the head.
Yeah.
A little bit of a push-off, but he was going down anyway.
Pat, how old were you in 1993?
Somewhere around 6 or 7.
Did you were you on the couch watching with Dad with this one, or did you come to find it later?
No, actually, I was watching this one because I used to watch all of George Foreman's fights because I loved him.
What about you, Robert? Was this something that you were privy to? I guess you were probably around. I think you and Pat are around the same age, so I'm guessing you were a youngster when this was on.
Yeah, and boxing was not a thing I watched a lot of in terms of actual boxing. I didn't watch a lot of combat sports as a kid. It just wasn't something that really took a lot of prevalence amongst my viewing time.
How old were you when you got into watching combat sports?
Oh. Watching actively, I was in my late teens.
Okay.
Really late teens. I just didn't have the opportunity to a lot. A lot of it's on pay-per-view, and that $60 a month or so just wasn't a viable expense.
Sure. I was definitely one of those people who was very interested in combat sports, but watching on TV, it was just hard. It was hard to find until the last maybe 10 years when it became more prevalent on cable and whatnot. Not necessarily always a pay-per-view affair. So round 2 has been a little less busy for Tommy. It's seen Carl Williams gingerly stepping up his attack. I wouldn't say he's gone crazy here, but he's trying to get behind that jab a little bit more.
It feels like good.
Truth is using that jab, doubling it, tripling it, which is when you see Morrison generally have problems.
Why does he have trouble defending against a common first attack like a jab?
Tommy's very reliant on seeing one thing, making a move, and then coming after it. But when you double and triple the jab, he's not really always defensively adept at looking to avoid it.
Yeah, any single shots Tommy Morrison tends to do a decent job of countering or dealing with, but once things get into, again, measured high output, that's where he really, that's where he tends to be at his worst. If you get into a full-on brawl, that's one thing, but again, just a really measured, high output, technical, or sort of technical fights, we can see Williams holding and hitting there at the same time.
And Mills gives him a warning for that one.
Tommy getting into a clinch more often in this round. Not really.
I think he punched himself out a little bit in that first round. Now they trade left hooks, and both men go a little bit weak in the knees.
Yeah, I caught, at least in my eye, I thought Tommy got more shook up on that exchange than Carl did.
As evidenced by the fact that he did not try to follow up.
Yeah, the old saying is you don't hook with a hooker, but Williams got away with it there. He landed the stronger hook of the two, and Morrison seemed to be not willing to immediately rush in on him, which would tell you that he's hurt.
Okay, Tommy got a good left in there. Off the counter, it looked like. It was like a hair's breadth away from Carl's attack.
And that'll end that round. You can still see some of those bad habits Carl Williams has defensively. Again, his right hand is constantly dropping lower on his torso instead of being glued to his head, where you want it if you're blocking someone whose primary offensive weapon is a left hook.
And I think that was a much better round for Carl Williams. Tommy slowed down a bit, wasn't as aggressive. Carl actually did some good work inside and in the clinch. And we see a preview of George Foreman in the dressing room, who's going to fight in the main event tonight against Pierre Kutzer. And if Morrison and Foreman both win, the plan is to match them together.
Yeah, they both again, there were a lot of occasions when Tommy Morrison, from a historical standpoint, was one win away from a real big payday. Or was signed for a big payday fight, and then, oh, hey, by the way, I have HIV. And guess what you can't do? One of the few things that you can have, and they won't let you fight.
Tommy, I'm not familiar with the latter part of Tommy Morrison's career. Did he end up getting HIV?
Yeah.
Yes, he did.
Wow,
he was scheduled to fight, I believe wasn't he scheduled to fight Tyson? Like they'd signed that?
They signed with Don King in a last-ditch effort to revive his career. He was scheduled for one tune-up fight.
Good left from Morrison. Caught him coming in.
Short left hand from Tommy drops Carl Williams. He was scheduled to fight a tune-up fight against Stormy Weathers, and then the plan was he was going to be a comeback opponent for Tyson. And Tommy immediately out, swinging wild.
Unfortunately, of recklessness is going to give Williams chances to recover.
I know you didn't say that, but I immediately, when you said Stormy, my brain went Daniels. I'm like, that's not what he meant.
No, Stormy Weathers.
Morrison, he contracted HIV, and you can't box if you have certain bloodborne illnesses.
Sure. Well, not a lot of ways you can get HIV, but sharing blood is one of them.
He had a lot of unprotected sex.
As Tommy lands 2 overhand rights to Carl Williams, who surprisingly took them well.
He was able to kind of get behind his shoulder a little bit on those, and that kind of mitigated some of the force of them. But, he is still not in the happiest of places right here, as Morrison is looking to tee off on him.
I can't believe this fight's going to go nearly the distance if it doesn't. I mean, the video itself is almost an hour and 20 minutes long, so I'm assuming it goes all 12 rounds. But it's amazing how many times so far Carl Williams has been knocked on his ass.
Williams fires back with a double uppercut right hand.
And wobbles Morrison a little bit. He was not too happy with that.
Carl has always, like Morrison, been one fight away from really establishing himself as an upper-tier heavyweight. Gave a great account of himself against Larry Holmes for the heavyweight championship, which put him on the map. But again, just couldn't close the distance in those fights with guys like Tim Witherspoon and, of course, the disaster against Mike Tyson.
Well, a lot of guys had that same reaction when they fought Tyson.
And Carl getting a little roadhouse action in with a left-right combination that was wild and missed. Morrison now leaning on him against the ropes. Carl again holding and hitting. Those lanes.
Yeah. I would have taken a point on that second one. Like, you've been warned clearly on this one, and he's gotten away with it a couple of times.
I don't like how inactive Tommy's been since the first round. Like, he's definitely throwing a lot of power punches, but I don't see a tremendous amount of volume coming from him.
This is one of the hallmarks of, as Tommy Morrison and a lot of other boxers of this era, I don't mean to single him out specifically, but a lot of guys who are on the gas.
Yeah, and Tommy's very, very known for big rounds where he goes all out, and then the next round he's looking for the shell answer.
Yeah, watching Tommy Morrison's career, you can very clearly tell points at which he, like, not just when he gets on it, but how he is cycling even. And at the moment, yeah, he's very clearly operating in occasional sprints.
Pat, how long did the George Foreman comeback tour last exactly?
From 1987 to 1997.
Oh, wow. A good 10 years, huh? It felt like a lot shorter, but I may not have been paying attention that whole time.
A lot of the bit was ignored until 1990 when he fought Jerry Cooney, and then had the fight with Holyfield the next year. Then a little bit of State of Midland, and then in 94 when he won the title from Michael Moore, it kicked into high gear again. And then fought a lesser caliber of opponent following that in the next couple of years. And then there was the fight with Shannon Briggs where he lost, but most viewers think he won. And at that point, that was really the end for Big George.
Him coming back at that age was somewhat miraculous.
Was he in his 40s at that time?
He came back at 37. Won the title at 45.
That's impressive.
Isn't he still the oldest heavyweight champion?
He is still the oldest to win the heavyweight championship.
So Carl Williams again came out flicking that jab out there. I like his technique so far. It's a shame he's been knocked on his ass twice.
Well, he is the superior technician, but he's also playing a long game, whereas Tommy Morrison doesn't have much of a game plan after the first 3 rounds.
And again, look at when Williams jabs where his right hand is. This is how he got clipped by Mike Tyson early and had that fight stopped very quickly in his only shot at the undisputed heavyweight championship.
Yeah, you don't want to drop your hands against Mike Tyson, who will hit you with the impact of being hit by a car.
And you don't want to drop your hands against anyone, and he is consistently, when his left hand shoots out, his right drops.
And to be quite honest, in terms of raw punching power, I would put Morrison's left hook above Tyson's.
Tyson just had Tyson really benefited from superior technique.
And a good uppercut by Williams.
Definitely.
I would say one of Tyson's, I think the thing that people don't talk about with Tyson, because everyone talks about his power. That's what he's known for. That's why he got the video game and and all the notoriety. But I think the thing that gets often neglected is his speed. The man had really fast hand speed.
Especially for a heavyweight.
Yeah, excellent hand speed was his biggest asset, in my opinion.
And his jab. Everyone forgets about Mike Tyson's jab. He had a good jab. Again, not the most educated jab you'll ever see, even at heavyweight, but it set up so much of his actual offense when he was fighting anyone who knew what they were doing. And
I think in comparison to what we're seeing from here, whereas Tommy is much more reliant in this fight on wading in and looking for an opportunity to score with a big left or right hook, you would not normally see that from Mike, at least Mike pre-split from Kevin Rooney.
Yeah, he was much more adroit about giving his opponent something to think about and exploding through distance rather than simply wading forward like a man pushing his way through wet cement.
And Carl, again, pushing out 2 jabs, 3 jabs. Morrison finally with a jab and actually offset Carl pretty good with that.
Yeah.
If he'd do more of that, he'd find more opportunity to land that big left hook. But he's also trying to throw it from way outside, which is how Carl's been able to score with that right uppercut so often.
What's incredible about this fight to me is that the rounds that Tommy Morrison hasn't knocked him on his ass are the rounds that Tommy Morrison is losing.
Yeah, Tommy is very much a feast or famine style of fighter. If he doesn't score big, he doesn't really score at all.
Like there's been quite a number of 10-9 rounds for Carl Williams. Unfortunately, they're zeroed out by 10-8 rounds for Tommy Morrison.
I think at the moment we're, 2 10-8s for Tommy, 2 10-9s for Williams? Because he's been knocked down twice.
Right.
So yeah, there'd be 2 10-8s for Tommy and then 2 10-9s for Williams. But you're also continuing to see Morrison slow down. He's sucking a fair bit of wind in the corner here.
It was mentioned before that Tommy was on the gas. Were they not testing for... Okay. I'm not even going to finish that sentence.
Okay, in all seriousness, drug testing in boxing generally is iffy. Drug testing in the 80s to 90s, yeah. If you think they had effective drug testing at this period of time in boxing history, I have beachfront property in Oklahoma I would love to sell you.
Fantastic.
And steroid testing at this point is still a very new science, considering they have only banned steroid usage in 1990.
Yeah, there's a lot of just the testing that's a little bit iffy. There's a lot of more designer products that are escaping testing. I mean, the ability to cheat drug testing is always a step ahead of the actual testing. I mean, that has been for the entire history of drug testing in athletics.
We are in round 5 here as Tommy Morrison pushes Carl against the ropes.
And he backed him up with a jab, which is something, again, Morrison has used little to never in this fight.
It's amazing to me how fighters like Tommy Morrison, and there's plenty of other examples, I don't mean to pick on him specifically, because Tommy doesn't even have a good jab. But when he uses what he has, it's effective, and down Morrison goes after a right hand behind the ear.
Williams with a beautiful straight right hand behind the ear, followed it up with a right hook that really didn't connect, but Morrison already on the way down. And Carl is now much more alive in this fight than he had been. Good uppercut,
big uppercut
from
and
Morrison.
Yeah.
Morrison looks for the single leg, the traditional defense to a knockdown.
So, yeah, I was going to say, Carl Williams, his best weapon aside from the jab, in terms of raw power, has been that uppercut, and he's nailed Morrison with it.
Morrison, as a tremendous number of fighters do who try to close distance by waiting, ducks his head. And if you don't have your guard up properly, you get uppercutted.
Yeah.
Which Williams is
He also
showing
took one
off.
to the back of the head during all of that. I mean, I don't think Williams was aiming for the back of the head. He just happened to hit him there.
And more holding and hitting from Williams.
But he's landed pretty consistently following that knockdown, although he just did get dinged by a left hook to the temple.
So one
And
of the
now
things,
holding and hitting again is Carl Williams. Mills...
I am shocked Mills Lane hasn't deducted a point.
So
Good left from
one of the
Morrison
things
there
I'm
for the
noticing
entry.
from Morrison in this fight so far is, one, how reliant he is on just that power. Like, he's expecting to take this guy out with just a handful of punches, and that's it. I'm not seeing a tremendous amount of technique here, and we've already talked about his gas tank being low because of the steroids. That's fairly evident.
While that certainly is in evidence, in all fairness, he's also a heavyweight. It's not like...
You say that, but there are plenty of heavyweights we've seen in MMA and boxing with perfectly fine cardio.
No, there are not plenty.
No,
there are
no,
a
there's
few.
not.
There's a handful. There's
No.
one.
There's more. Hang on. In all seriousness, I could name you probably 5 to 10 heavyweights with decent cardio, maybe 2 with what I would consider good to great.
Are we talking
That's
just
in
boxing,
MMA.
or I was going to say because I was
No, that's just MMA. If we're talking about boxing, there's a few more. Of course, boxing also has a fair number of slightly smaller heavyweights who come up and then try to weaponize their pace against larger opponents.
Let's say Cain Velasquez and JDS come to mind, and then Stipe Miocic are three guys at the very least who have pretty decent cardio.
Stipe has good. Again, Cain has good to great cardio. Verdum was okay. Verdum has decent cardio. Miocic does. You're correct there.
So, through 5 rounds, we've got Morrison, who's knocked down Williams twice to win 2 10-8 rounds. Williams has won 2 10-9 rounds. And after that round, where Morrison was dropped twice, you have to give Williams a 10-7 round.
Yeah, the scorecards. If this goes to the judges, the scorecards are going to be all over the place.
I believe they're already scoring at 120-0 to Canelo.
Well, sure. Well, of course. Look, they're giving it to Canelo's mother.
And Williams, again, that's what he needs to do. He used his jab to separate and exited. And he exited to Morrison's right, which is not common with what you do against a right-handed fighter. But you have to be so wary of Morrison's left hook that we really don't have a choice.
I'd almost think it's safer to circle to Tommy's right than his left, given how left hook dependent he is.
And
it's not that
Williams buried 2 left hooks into Morrison.
Morrison, he sagged visibly after that. His body is not feeling good.
We got sidetracked into a conversation about cardio. The last comment I wanted to make on Tommy Morrison's fighting style into the 6th round of this fight is what a bully he is. He seems to kind of throw his weight into the guy. Look for those power punches. There's not a lot of setup, not a lot of combinations. It's just throw my fairly large torso at you and then follow it up with one power punch. And when he can't do that, he just pushes the guy.
Williams barely got out of the way of that left hook, but he did get out of the way of it.
He did. He threw an uppercut, which has been a great weapon for him, but he threw it from very far outside.
And with no setup.
Yeah, he was very fortunate to get out of the way of that left hook. And now some infighting here where he's actually doing a good job of pushing Tommy Morrison back.
So, Pat, has Tommy Morrison always fought like a bully, or did this come later where he became more reliant on his size and his power?
Generally, in fights against a better class of opponent, Morrison was more reliant on trying to land the big shot and trying to bull his way in.
Yeah, when he was fighting guys who were at or lower than his level, he would actually try to set things up a little bit more. And to his credit, I think he knows he can't get away with that against a higher level of opposition. So he goes with what he can do, like that right. But you're starting to see the effects of the fatigue on Morrison. His punches do not have the same pop on them that they did before.
And Williams shaking his head no is generally a very clear sign that, yes, that punch bothered me.
Yeah,
he was hit with another one shortly after.
Yeah, Morrison snuck in a good uppercut there, and that's when he dropped his hands and just started walking backwards.
Yeah, Morrison having moments of success here, but those same punches, 3 rounds ago would have dropped him. So, well, I don't mean to say that he's not having any effect, because he most certainly is. Again, you acknowledge the punch in any way, it got you.
And, again, Carl Williams doing a lot of holding behind the neck, which is illegal, still Ali special. And he has not held and hit since that final warning from Mills Lane. So apparently that did its desired job.
And here we're getting a very troubling statistic for Tommy Morrison. He's only fought past the 6th round once to this point in title fights. That's not a good thing.
And that was a dramatic come-from-behind victory against Joe Hipp, in which Morrison had his jaw broken and broke both of his hands.
Boy, those were the days. My goodness.
Well, the hands, you'll still see guys fight with broken hands these days, but the jaw, not so much.
Yeah.
Excellent fight, by the way, if you've never seen it. Tommy Morrison, Joe Hipp. Joe Hipp, the first Native American to ever challenge for the heavyweight championship of the world.
Oh, that does sound interesting. I'll have to check that out.
And we see Williams back to jabbing here. I think at this point he's confident not so much in his power, but in Morrison's lack of cardio. He's not. Again, there's still all the same issues that Morrison has exploited intermittently in Williams' game, such as that left hook there, getting by poor defensive posture.
I was going to say, Williams is actually still using his footwork, which I like, such as it is.
Yeah, he is the better conditioned fighter, but that much is very, very obvious at this point.
I do think Morrison gained some confidence after the last round where he was able to hit and hurt Williams. And Carl reaching with the right hand, not getting there. But the jab is doing work. It's paying dividends, and it's scoring, which Morrison at the moment is not doing.
Does Williams have a better reach than Morrison?
Yes, he has about a 6
reach
advantage.
I was going to say, he looks like he has a significant reach advantage. It's probably why he's been pretty successful with that jab. What he's got to do is find an answer for Morrison crowding him.
Well, there's a couple of ways to deal with the guy who tries to come in head first like Morrison does. My favorite method is probably it's slightly dirty, but I prefer I think the British refer to it as the old cheeky nodder. Get your own head lower, duck down, and let them run into the top of your head.
And Morrison's white, so he would cut.
Nice jab there from Morrison. I mean, for some great examples of that particular technique, if you've never seen it, watch the Holyfield Tyson fights. Evander does that all the time to dissuade Tyson from leaping in. And if you're an MMA fan, watch Henry Cejudo fight. He does it all the time.
Now, in a clean sense, what you can also do is take your lead hand, in this instance, because Morrison is such a dangerous left-hand puncher, and hit him in the sternum on the way in.
Yeah, that's, again, if you're in the interest of being, of fighting completely within the rules, and I do advocate for that, by the way, that jab to the sternum is kind of the boxing equivalent of a stiff arm in football. You're just giving that much range and that much resistance to their attempt to come forward, and it will usually stop them from getting there.
Tommy with a good double jab that time.
I was going to say, finally, and he's done it a few times in this round. Then he went right back to trying to hit a home run. But I've actually seen him try to employ that double jab a few times here in round 7. Nice to see that he's trying to pick up just a smidgen of technique. But then he immediately rested back on, and to no avail, those huge power punches.
Nice left hook from Williams, followed by a right. Yeah, Morrison's watching him will be frustrating to anyone who appreciates technique and setups, because on the rare occasion he does use them, they work. He just doesn't use them consistently.
Tommy at this point was trained largely by John Brown, who was responsible for a lot of Golden Gloves champions throughout the country, and was obviously, as a Golden Glove tremendous coach, very big on fundamentals. And he said he had a maddening time training Tommy at various points because of his tendency to just go tough man. Because Tommy had fought in tough man before boxing. And you see Harold Lederman's card, which I actually will agree with at this point, based on the scoring, with all of the deductions for knockdowns. He's got Morrison at a 1-point lead, 65-64.
I'd actually have it. There was one round, I think it was the fourth, that I thought I leaned towards Williams rather than Morrison, but it was a 10-9 situation. So I don't know. I don't think it. I will defer to your judgment on that one.
All right, here we go. Round 8.
And Williams back to jabbing. Morrison back to not avoiding it.
Morrison a little tentative to go on the attack here, or even just wade forward.
His legs are not under him. I mean, he's not wobbly yet, but you can see, watch the way he moves. His legs are not fully under him. He's doing a lot of plodding or walking, whereas Williams is still good about maintaining a proper stance and cracking him when he's coming in. Morrison's breaking his stance all the time just to try and close distance.
And I think the biggest thing from Carl I've seen is he's been very reliant on not punching to the body the last few rounds, whereas he had shook Morrison a few times with some very good left hooks to the body.
Kind of a shame he didn't go back to that.
Morrison just dug to the body there. I'd actually like to see him trying to work the body a little bit more instead of going, head hunting, where, Carl Williams seems to be, at least at this juncture, the faster fighter.
Yeah, Morrison, with his cardio going, that does make you more susceptible to the body shot. And a little bit of a paintbrush from the elbow there by Carl Williams on the break.
Morrison snuck in a left as they were clinched up like that right before the break. And we've got a timeout. Nope, they're back.
There's an unintentional butt as being ruled by Mills Lane.
That was a very fan-friendly ruling by Mills Lane there.
Oh, nice left hook from Tommy Morrison. Follows with an uppercut.
Over the top of a 3-2 by Williams. Morrison now has him hurt.
We're getting one of the last flurries from Morrison here. He is...
Oh, yeah.
Got him on the ropes. He is looking to tee off, but you can see even now he doesn't have the energy in his arms and shoulders to mount sustained offense.
He comes right back. He comes right back. He is a bull right now. He is trying to take this man's head off. And it's funny because as I look at this, 20 years from this fight, they'll probably stop it looking like that.
I'm not so sure they would. He's getting the standing 8 count here.
No, it's being stopped.
Oh, that's it. Oh, wow.
Oh, what's that?
You are correct.
The biggest reason there being one thing. Williams was not punching back.
Yeah, if he'd done anything, Morrison is... All of those sequences featured Morrison coming forward, throwing 1 or 2 punches, and getting tied up in the clinch. If Williams had done anything back, they would have been happy to let that fight go. But
this video goes another 40 minutes. What the hell is on this?
It probably has the Foreman fight.
Okay, it's not titled that way. That's why I was questioning it.
Yeah, that's. I'm curious. I was curious as to the length of it when I saw it, but I guess maybe it's the doubleheader.
Huh? Interesting. All right. Well, we're done here, yeah?
Hang on, fast forward. I want to see if that's what actually takes up the rest of this.
Okay. I'm just
curious about this.
So that's Tommy Morrison by TKO, right, Pat?
TKO yes. Round 9.
Outstanding.
One of the last, somewhat great performances of his career.
Holy crap, we're almost an hour into this video. They're showing a replay
I guess
of this
it just...
thing.
No, I think it's just maybe the video doubles.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, that's got to be what that is, because it is the same thing over.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I'm just kind of skipping forward. We're at an hour and 10 minutes, and it's we're into round 3 again.
Yeah, that's...
Okay. Well, very good, Pat.
Wow. Can I just say briefly that commentary, I forget who the commentator was who just said that's the greatest left hook in the heavyweight division.
I'm guessing it was Lamps.
Probably.
Hyperbole, thy name is sports commentator.
Boy, ain't that the truth.
But you know what? In terms of raw power, I don't think he's wrong.
Fair enough. Again, Morrison's left hook, if you were to just, get him and, Tyson and just say, okay, you're going to stand static and throw the left hook, Morrison probably does hit harder.
Yeah, that's the thing with Tommy, and that was why he, not only because obviously he's white, but, because he did pack such power in that punch. And even in his early, ESPN run, when he was really the ESPN featured fighter, and he had something like 19 fights in a row on ESPN, he was knocking guys out with a lot of right hands too. I saw him knock a guy out with a jab. So that was also part of the allure of Tommy, was that he not only was white, but he could punch.
Yeah, he was not while he was in some respects a product of hype, he was not pure hype. There was ability there.
Okay. Well, Pat, I certainly appreciate you spending some time with us here on the Radulich Broadcasting Network. I know you have sworn off modern boxing because this is a farcical event, but it's good to know that I can get you in here on some of these retro cards. So this was fun, and I certainly appreciate you picking something more in my wheelhouse.
Okay, hang on. I have to say this because I just saw this on Twitter. The UFC staff are currently collecting all the cans, popcorn, and bottles thrown into the ring by the Mexican fans to be collected into a single big bag in case Greg Hardy's next opponent drops out.
Yeah. Thank God for the girls, because since that was basically the main event of that show, and it was a pretty good one.
I'm going to throw this out there, and you'll say, I'm curious what the reaction is. If you'd like to really get a good grip of Tommy Morrison's career, there's one fight that I think we could do without going too long, and I'm going to send a link in our group right now. But I think it's entirely worth looking at if you really want a better understanding of Tommy's career.
Okay.
Yeah, sure.
I'll go ahead and recreate the room then.
Oh, I love it. Okay, perfect.
What do you think, Jonas? Think I should do one more podcast before I go to sleep? Yeah. Okay.
Do we get a thumbs up from Jonas?
We got the thumbs up from Jonas. He approves.
Who says your kids never do anything right besides me?
I've been known to say that on occasion.
Yeah, I know.
You're
We
both,
all have it.
You're both terrible.
Okay,
All
so
right.
there's the link. Oh, and also, we did forget to mention that part of the marketing strategy for Tommy, we mentioned Rocky V, we mentioned he was white and a heavyweight, we mentioned he could punch. They also hyped him up as the grandnephew of hero of American cinema, John Wayne, whose real name was Marion Morrison.
Profoundly, my dog does not care for that, by the way. But was that even true? I can't remember if that was true. I think it was BS.
It was absolutely not true, but they never fact-checked it, because why not? It's a white heavyweight with a punch.
Boxing in the 90s. We're just
And that's why Tommy carried the nickname the Duke.
it's one of those.
Fight probably more than any other really,
Oh, I know this one.
really is just a microcosm of Tommy's career.
All right. So this is Tommy the Duke Morrison versus Michael Bentt for the World Boxing Organization. Thank you. Championship. WBO Championship.
Which at this time was not recognized as a real heavyweight championship, I should point out.
And what time is this, Pat?
This is 1994, I believe. So what we're seeing is this is a couple fights after what we just watched. Morrison gave what some consider both his best and worst performance against George Foreman in a fight where he did not stand toe-to-toe. He would hit and run, and when I say hit and run, I don't mean in that he was evasive. He would literally hit George and turn his back and run across the ring, and won a decision to win the then not regarded WBO title. And
if memory serves, if he won this fight, this was going to be his Tyson setup, correct?
No, if he wins this fight, he is going to fight Lennox Lewis for
that
the
was
WBC title for $8 million.
I couldn't remember if it was Tyson or Lewis. I knew it was one of those two. Yeah, this was his Lennox Lewis setup fight. Really, just kind of moderate point. There's a series on Netflix I found rather interesting.
Loser.
That is correct, because there is an entire episode dedicated to Michael Bentt.
Yes.
Which is probably the best episode of that season to date.
And
Yeah,
Michael Bentt
Loses on my watch list, by the way. I just haven't gotten around to it.
Michael Bentt was a New York Golden Gloves champion. He was very well known in the gyms here. His father was originally from Jamaica. Michael was originally from Jamaica, had a very thick accent at first that he kind of lost. But he was well known around the gyms as a tough guy. He won the National Golden Gloves Championship while fighting out of New York at a time when New York was not necessarily producing the best talent in regards to the Golden Gloves. And he went on to turn pro, lost an early fight by decision, and was really fighting nondescript opposition before he got this opportunity in Morrison's hometown of
He
J.O.
has bubblegum. That's so great.
I don't understand these things.
Well, Bentt also, just without spoiling the outcome of this fight, for those of you unfamiliar with it, this is not long before Bentt would essentially retire from boxing, move out to Hollywood, and become kind of a fixture of film production. He's written a few, I believe he's directed, he's choreographed some fights. I believe he still lives and works out there in the industry.
He does. He helps train a lot of actors in terms of boxing choreography and fitness. He's made a good living for himself. So good for Michael Bentt, who saw the bigger picture and got out while he had his senses about him.
Any good movies that we know of where he was the fight coordinator?
I wouldn't call it good, but he was the main fight coordinator and had a part in Ali.
Oh, okay. Most people who saw Ali thought it was good.
Yeah, most people are dumb, so there's that.
There is that. I did not realize the Hurricane actually was at Rahwah State Prison.
Yes,
until I was reading up on it.
There.
Yes.
One of the worst movies.
Oh yeah,
ever.
he was actually Sonny Liston in Ollie. I forgot that.
He was.
Credit to him for doing that justice, at least, because of all the things that are wrong with that movie, the portrayal of Sonny Liston is not one of them. Apart from their,
well.
All right,
he was in Collateral for a little bit. Again, he's had a lot of small roles. He does a lot of writing as well that kind of goes unrecognized. But
you see Tommy's record here: 38-1, 33 knockouts.
A really impressive record. Of course, boxing in the 90s, a little bit less forgiving as far as the losses go. I remember, again, referencing Michael Bentt, he lost his professional debut and was immediately announced dead on arrival by a significant amount of the punditry.
Yeah.
Which go on to be proven incorrect, mind you, but
the heavyweight boxing scene in the 90s was a Shark Tank.
Yeah, there were so many talented guys.
And they matched up very similar. Bentt, 4 years the senior, 1 inch taller, 1 inch reach advantage, weight, Morrison 1 pound heavier, so not a lot separating these guys. You see, and like we talked about during the Carl Williams fight, you see how inactive Tommy was for so much of that fight, averaging 25 punches a round, which is absurdly low even by heavyweight standards.
Yeah, Bentt there throws. I'm sorry. These are verses. So versus Carl Williams, 9 thrown. Jesus, versus Mark. Was it Wills?
Point being, Bentt, more a traditional boxer, and again coming from the amateur ranks. We already went over some of his credentials. Whereas Morrison, again, had some good boxing trainers at his disposal, but was never able to really internalize and integrate some of the fundamentals, and just his instinct was to go brawler whenever things got weird or his gas evaded him.
All right, I believe we are ready to get underway here. Another HBO card, by the way.
As evidenced by the ridiculous check they will be handing to Michael Buffer in the back.
HBO
so young
in 2019 has decided to give up on the live boxing game. Like, you know what? We'll just make Emmy award-winning television and get out of boxing.
Yeah,
it's kind of a shame.
There's a reason I don't watch HBO anymore.
So what do you think of these judges, Pat? Harry Davis, John Rupert, and Dr. Clock San Martino.
No relation to Bruno.
That's a shame. I think at least one of those judges was on record at some point as having taken a payoff, but...
Fantastic.
We'll see how much that matters here.
No, this one I remember. I'm not concerned about the judges in this one.
Well, I was going to say, we are 6.5 minutes into this 20-minute video. I'm guessing this don't go to distance.
There's one of my all-time favorite calls in this fight.
That was a shitty fireworks display. I mean, granted, I understand it's the 90s, but...
It's the 90s. You're in rural Oklahoma, Mark.
Also, yeah. Oh, I can't believe we didn't mention where this fight was taking place.
Yes, in Morrison's backyard of Oklahoma. This is supposed to be his big homecoming prior to fighting Lennox Lewis.
God, Lennox would have. Again, I said the Tyson fight wouldn't have been competitive. Putting that man in the ring with Lennox Lewis would have been sanctioned murder.
Well, they did do it, and it was very close to sanctioned murder.
Yeah, they did it some years later. I forgot. Yeah, that was so ugly.
Exactly what round did Tommy Morrison get knocked out against Lennox Lewis?
I believe it was the 6th, if I'm not mistaken.
Nice.
That fight should have been stopped earlier.
Yeah, I think there were 5 knockdowns.
Again, that fight should have been stopped by Morrison's corner. I mean, that shouldn't have been sanctioned to begin with, but if you're going to sanction it, your cornering should save you from the type of prolonged beating he was subjected to in that fight.
And was that the last time we would see Tommy Morrison?
No, that was sadly not.
Oh, God.
I believe that was his... Was that his last, or was like his second to last title fight? I seem to recall, but no, he kept fighting for a little bit after that. It was just such an execution.
Yeah, he was never in that fight at any point. He fought one more time after that, truly sanctioned, due to George Foreman pulling some strings to get him a payday after his HIV diagnosis. And then he had two very questionable fights in later years after he claimed he was not HIV positive and it was a false diagnosis. There's a lot of...
He got real paranoid about that.
All right, we are starting here into round one.
You can already see the superior fundamentals of Bentt. His hands are in proper position. He's trying to work his jab. Good uppercut there from Morrison, though.
And Tommy immediately boring his way in. Hurts Bentt to the left.
This is what I was talking about with the last fight. He just sort of hunches over, sticks his head out there, and bullies his way into the guy, crowds him, and then looks for power hooks.
And
Morrison
is Jesus Christ.
And he's down.
Morrison dropped to his knees.
Does not really know where he is right now.
In a different environment, that was a prison beating. And I won't tell you what follows a prison beating with the way Morrison fell, but Jesus Christ.
Bentt just absolutely mollywops him down
the
that time.
knockdown rule is in effect in Oklahoma.
So if Morrison goes down again in the same round, that's it.
Morrison doesn't, at this point, look so much hurt as he does in disbelief. Bentt is ready to jump on him.
Bentt knows this is his golden ticket.
I was going to say, Bentt is going after Morrison like Morrison owes him money.
Yeah. And down he goes.
And we're done here.
It.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
Michael Bentt would go on to, I believe he got the Lennox Lewis fight coming out of this.
No, he fought Herbie Hyde.
Oh, that was it. And he lost.
Yes. So after Morrison was dropped for the third time and Bentt had his celebration, Jim Lampley makes the call. And he says, and there goes Tommy Morrison's $8 million payday.
That is such a great call.
At which point, Xavier Woods jumped up into the ring and started blowing his trombone.
So if you watch the 30 for 30 documentary, they talk a lot about this fight and how to train for this fight, Tommy was going to all the bars in Kansas City like he normally did, didn't take this fight seriously, wanted just to show off in front of his hometown. And even if you look at Tommy at the beginning of this fight, he looks bloated.
He does not look to be in fight shape as soon as he disrobes in this fight.
Yeah, his face is bloated and puffy. He's got a double chin almost. You know,
his chest and his abs do not have anywhere near the same level of definition.
It's I cannot believe the amount of upset victories in the history of sports. Because, in a situation where it's like the hometown hero, like this was totally set up for Morrison to win.
Oh yeah.
And he blows
they were trying to he was going to get $8 million to get destroyed by Lennox Lewis, but $8 million is $8 million.
Sure.
Yeah.
For $8 million, I'd get destroyed by Lennox Lewis.
Yes, you and me both. And Tommy, he would win about 7 or 8 fights after this against.
There's this beautiful short right. Tommy went into brawling mode immediately along the fence. Bentt with a really just textbook counter right, and that was all she wrote.
Yeah.
And he was never in it after that knockdown.
Just utterly lost all technique, coordination, senses, and math.
At least one of those he didn't have to begin with. And here we see the finishing sequence. Just really, really wonderful stuff from Michael Bentt there as far as the finishing sequence goes.
Tommy would win 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 7 of his next 8 fights, minus a draw with Ross Purity on ESPN. That had a lot of people questioning whether he would ever come back again. He basically revived his career very shortly during a brutal 6-round fight with Razor Ruddock. That was a modern classic at the time. The Ruddock win got him into the ring with Lennox, who stopped him very one-sidedly.
Yeah, again, that a fight that looked. If you watched that fight and didn't know the build-up to that fight, you wouldn't know what had happened. Like, you would question how that fight got sanctioned.
Yeah, and again, he largely got that based on who he was and the win over Ruddock, who was done after that fight.
TKO a minute and 33 into the first round. That's a fucking crying shame in boxing. In your main event, such as it was.
Yeah, sort of. Yeah, again, like this is what would happen to boxing if it was booked by the WWE at the moment. You're in your hometown, kid. You're doing the job. It'll be good.
And in the next sequence, we're going to ass rape Jim Ross. All right. And on that lovely note,
in all seriousness, I think I saw this on Twitter. Someone asked, "What's your oddest exchange from work?" And someone from the Attitude Era replied, "The creative meeting that at the end, that as we were wrapping up, legitimately closed with, oh, we have to figure out what Mae Young's giving birth to."
And once again, on that lovely note, so next weekend there's a good pay-per-view boxing event. You have Spence versus Porter. We won't be covering it, or at least I won't be. I will be at a friend's house watching. Robert Winfree will be covering Hermanson versus Cannonier.
Hang on. I can actually watch that event.
Okay.
Hermanson versus Cannonier starts very early here in the States. They're doing it prime time. They're in Denmark, actually.
Well, if you and Pat want to get together and do coverage for that, or if you want to be, the Joey Styles of the Radulich Broadcasting Network and provide alternative commentary for it, be my guest. I will be drunk and in a meat coma. That's what I'll be doing.
I respect your drunkenness and your consumption of meat.
However, Pat and I, if Pat remembers and or is sober, we will be doing on October 5th, Whitaker versus Adesanya, UFC 243. Right, Pat?
Which Robert will be providing live coverage for on 411 Mania.
Yes, but he won't do audio coverage with me because he just wants to appreciate Sir Robert of Knuckles doing his thing.
Okay, hang on. I mean this in all seriousness to anyone listening. If you have not seen Adesanya versus Gastelum from earlier this year, look it up. Tremendous, tremendous fight.
Yeah, they showed
absolutely tremendous.
They showed some of the footage from that during tonight's UFC coverage in Mexico.
Don't watch. You can't get the full. You can't really appreciate that if you don't see the whole fight. It is a glorious back and forth, blood and guts affair that's dead even going into the 5th round. And the performance Adesanya gives in the 5th round is tremendous.
As far as other coverage we'll be doing, myself and Victor Kirkado will be looking at Alexander Usyk versus Tyrone Spong. This is Tyrone Spong's.
That's such a weird fight.
Yeah, well, I signed him up for coverage for that one, so because I'm definitely going to be watching it instead of watching Joanna Champion versus Michelle Waterson, which Robert will be covering right here in Tampa, as a matter of fact. So yeah, that's on DAZN. We'll be doing live coverage of that, myself and Victor. We're going to skip the 19th because I can't get anybody who has any kind of pride or self-esteem or anything else to cover bare knuckle boxing 8 with me. Bigfoot Silva versus Gabriel Gonzaga. I'll just have to watch that one in the dark.
You should not admit to publicly. You should not publicly admit you'll be watching that.
Yeah. Well, I'm not going to watch it live either because I'll be at something called a pig jig. Don't ask.
Jake, that's racist.
It is. We might be providing coverage of Shakur Stevenson versus Jote Gonzalez. I haven't decided if we're doing that one or even what time it is, assuming it stays on the calendar. But, however, for the BMF title, we will, Robert Winfree and I, be providing alternative commentary for UFC 244, Jorge Masvidal versus Nate Diaz, where the winner will be presented with a BMF title by The Rock, Dwayne Johnson. Fantastic. God bless America.
Let's be honest. Is there more than 4 fights we can think of that could be made in the UFC that we'd rather see than Masvidal versus Diaz.
Hang on, 4?
4.
Okay.
You got
2.
Khabib and Tony.
Khabib and Tony, absolutely number 1. Believe it or not, Tony and Gaethje is my number 2.
Really? Okay.
Oh, did you see Gaethje just smoke Cowboy?
Yeah.
Gaethje, since the setbacks against Alvarez and Poirier, has done some real refinement to his game. I mean, his last 3 fights, he knocked out James Vick, Edson Barboza, and Cowboy all in the first round. He has, again, seriously refined his game. And if I never get to see the insane violence of those 2 maniacs in the cage, it will be a crying shame.
What about John Jones and Stipe?
They're working on Stipe DC3.
Oh, are they?
Okay, so hang on. This is fantasy booking. My apologies. I would act. You know what? Yeah, okay. Jones and Stipe is on the cusp of that, but I think that's about it. Actually, I mean, we're gonna get Holloway and Volkanovski, which I'm very, very jazzed for. I don't care anything about Henry Cejudo. I don't care anything about the women's fights. Which is, again, there's some talented women, but if we're talking, is there anything I would make over Masvidal and Diaz?
We've seen Valentina and Amanda, and we've seen that Valentina, no matter what she does, is not going to get the win.
Has Amanda Nunes thrown the featherweight title off a bridge yet?
No. I don't know why they haven't, but she's going to be defending the bantamweight title against Jermaine Durandamy at UFC 245. They're working for 3 title fights on that card. They announced Holloway and Volkanovski for that card today, which I'm that's a great fight. I've been a big believer in Volkanovski for basically since his UFC debut.
They announced that while we were actually casting.
Yeah, it's a great fight as far as that goes. I'm very much looking forward to it. Is there any other fight that I would just, if I could fantasy book any fight I wanted? Light heavyweight's a dumpster fire. We're getting the one I want at middleweight. Welterweight, yeah, that's at welterweight. Much as I do want to see if nope, you know what? I don't think I can come up with 4 fights I'd rather see than Masvidal and Diaz. That's going to be
Derek Lewis versus Rampage at heavyweight.
Oh, shut up. Have you not? This is not a joke. I say this because I know you just bring that up to piss me off.
I'd rather see Carl Williams and Tommy Morrison 2 as they are right now. If you don't get that joke, they're both deceased.
Yeah. I have seen Rampage and Bellator. Okay, you haven't, Mark. I know you haven't because you just would say it to piss me off. I've seen Fat Page, and boy, howdy, is he fat.
Yeah.
I don't want to watch him fight Derek Lewis. I will say this, though. Derek Lewis going on Instagram and saying, just with the that stupid face-tatted rapper whose name I don't know.
Yeah, there's way too many of them.
The one who's giving deposition right now.
Again, you honky. Which one?
6'9".
Thank you. That's it.
All right.
Yeah, he went on Instagram and said, with this trial going on, I figure I'd get out ahead of it. About a year ago, I made some statements. I said that I took my shorts off because my balls was hot, but my balls wasn't really that hot. And I want to say that publicly, get out ahead of the story, and hope that my friends and my family and my fans will continue to support me going forward.
Terrific. All right.
Derek Lewis might be a miserable fighter in many respects, but he's a funny guy.
So as far as live combat sports coverage here on the Radulich Broadcasting Network, that's what we got. UFC 243, Alexander Usyk versus Tyrone Spong.
That is
nothing.
That's Spong's professional boxing debut, I believe.
Yep. And then Masvidal versus Nate Diaz.
That's so weird.
He could win. Spong's a good enough fighter, but Usyk's also a buzzsaw.
In the meantime, this week we finish on we finish up Onslaught Volume 4, the entire Onslaught epic, this Monday on the source material, and then we kick off October with Gotham by Gaslight. Robert and I
It's
will
so
review...
nice that I don't have to do that.
Speaking of things you do have to do, Robert and I will be reviewing Rambo: Last Blood.
There you go.
I'm sure the movie will be fine. Tune in to hear me and Robert rip apart the entire review community.
Apparently, there's a significant number of critics who don't like the movie because Rambo's no longer a hippie anarchist.
Fantastic. I hope he kills the Mexican mob in a MAGA hat.
God, I would so much rather... Like, if that actually happened, I would go right now to see that movie. I would pay full price.
Yes, Pat.
It's close.
Okay.
But then I will wait until Tuesday. If they didn't actually commit to it, I'll wait.
This Wednesday on the Metal Hammer of Doom, we review Korn, The Nothing. There was no Metal Hammer of Doom this past week. My house is in the middle of construction, and I couldn't find my computer. So, at that time. So, we got the computer out now, so we're podcasting ahoy. But we did find an old Nightwish review from 2015. I swear the show's gotten better since then. I just listened to it. Oof. Anyway, it's there. It's there if you want to see how bad things used to be. Especially if you think it's bad now. It was significantly worse. Speaking of significantly worse, myself and Robert Winfree will be reviewing Disenchantment Season 2. Part 2, as they're calling it. I rather enjoyed it. I just binged it on Friday. We'll see what Robert thinks of it. And then
I've seen it all now at this point, and... Okay. I look forward to talking about it with you. I'm just going to say it like that because I don't mean that in a combative sense.
Mm-hmm.
I am genuinely interested to see your experience versus my experience, how we had differing points, because I didn't laugh at it. I didn't laugh at this season as much as I did the first. But that's not to say I didn't enjoy it. I
did a lot, and I want to talk about a lot of parallels to The Simpsons in terms of how the show developed. And how this got to where The Simpsons got a lot faster, like in one season, as opposed to several. But we'll talk about it then. This past week, we did a pair of shows for The Dark Crystal. We did a TV party for Age of Resistance. And then Sean and I had a really interesting discussion, believe it or not, on Trial for The Dark Crystal. We actually had an honest-to-goodness debate about that and the nature of Jen, whom I compared to both Frodo and Luke Skywalker. So tune in to that and see what developed. Myself and Chris Bailey did a review of WWE Clash of the Champions. It was just the two of us. And that's it. So like I said, those shows are all in the archives. Pat, the last thing I saw that went up on the Casual Heroes was The Body Mechanic. And before that, you guys did a preview of King of the Ring. Since then... Poor Chad Gable lost to King Corbin. Are you ever going to talk about wrestling again, or have you just retired from anything that didn't happen after 1999?
I can talk about New Japan. I can talk about MLW.
Okay.
In somewhat fairness, the only thing interesting going on in WWE right now is watching them. Was trying to figure out how they're going to botch The Fiend and Seth Rollins at Hell in a Cell, because you know they're going to screw it up.
Well, the real question was, when are you podcasting again, other than when I twist your arm?
No.
When you twist his arm.
Well, he does podcast with the Casual Heroes, who occasionally post something.
Do I?
All right, moving on. Go ahead and do your plugs there, Winfree.
All right, you can find my full report for UFC on ESPN Plus 17 and the MMA Zone of 411 Mania. We referenced it a little bit at the top of the show. Next Saturday, I will have live coverage of UFC on ESPN Plus 18. This is the UFC's debut in Denmark. I believe the first prelims will start at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, which means I'm going to have to be up early, so I'll be annoyed, but I will be covering it. For as much as this card today was kind of crappy, and it was, next week has a couple of decent fights to potentially get excited about. Okay, I lied. There's like 3.
Well, you don't have to worry about me. You won't have to worry about me bothering you. I'll be at work.
You have the main event, Jack Hermanson and Jared Cannonier, is a good fight. You You have Gunnar Nelson and Gilbert Burns could be really fun if you're into grappling. Iwan Kutelaba and Khalil Roundtree Jr. will feature someone dying, so there's that. Okay, yeah. Nicholas Dahl be back in the UFC against the dirtiest fighter in the game, Alex Oliveira. Lando Venata and Mark Jacasey, that's iffy. But iffy on the positive side. So again, there's a lot of crap too. There's a lot of crap. But I will be wading through it. If you want to listen to my full review of UFC on ESPN Plus 17 and my preview of this coming event, Sundays I am the host of the 411 Ground and Pound MMA podcast. We look at the wide, wacky, wonderful world of mixed martial arts and talk about it.
Now, if you're really lonely and you're looking for someone to correspond with and you happen to like wrestling, Robert's been covering Impact. You can check out his reviews on 401money.com
That is true.
Late Friday nights.
Yeah, the weekly Impact show is kind of low man on the totem pole, and Larry Zonka would rather cover an ROH pay-per-view. And
Doesn't that say it all?
It kind of does, because, look, why anyone would voluntarily watch Matt Taven is absolutely beyond my experience as a human being.
Because he's awesome.
Pay for it.
Mark, just stop.
Did I mention I also want to see Fat Page versus Derek Lewis? Old hot balls. Keep going.
God, if you're
You see,
wondering
hang on.
who bought
That I at least
Matt
believe.
Taven shirt, it's Mark.
Look,
I'm the guy.
I at least believe you when you say you want to see Rampage and Derek Lewis. I believe that's an argument you're making in good faith. You and I both know your Taven thing is purely contrarian gimmickry, and I will not tolerate it.
It's 100% to support the T-shirt he bought.
Yep. I bought that T-shirt because everybody at Madison Square Garden was booing that poor man. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to take my contrarian ass and go buy his T-shirt. How about that?
Yes.
But we booed him not because he's a good heel. We booed him because he's not even terrible. It's just the fact that he's the top heel of that promotion says so much about how terrible that promotion is.
Yep.
Look, I mean, and I want to say at least some of this is not all Ring of Honor's fault. Let me be clear. Everybody that they had built up to be their main event or just below the main event over the last, 10 months has left. All the Bullet Club, gone. All the Undisputed Era, gone. Just everybody that they had in that position. Hey, we've got Adam Cole, and he's pretty great. We've got Redragon, and we've got Roderick Strong, and we've got the Young Bucks, and other elements of the Bullet Club, and Kenny Omega shows up every now and then, and isn't this all just great? And you know what? Okay, it's not the best, but it's not bad. And then suddenly WWE signs, the Undisputed Era, as they're now known. And then the Bucks decide, hey, AEW is going to be a thing, and that cost them all the rest of their main event scene. So they're basically left with Marty Scurll and Matt Taven, and they get into a contract bitch with Marty Scurll, so the only guy with actual heat and momentum you can't even put the title on because you can't trust him to be there in 8 months. So Matt Taven, who I remember, Mark, you will not. I remember him as part of the short-lived Ring of Honor Trios champions with the Kingdom. Matt Taven is terrible.
So thank you for joining us here on TV Party Tonight Extra. The Tommy Morrison's Greatest Hits, I think is what I'm going to call this.
Tommy Morrison's career in a nutshell.
An ode to Tommy Morrison. For Pat Mullin, for Robert Winfree.
Positively Tommy? Oh, wait, that might not play well.
Oh, that's so good.
Be well, as I said, be well, be safe, and behave.